So thank you so much for joining. I'm gonna try to, against all odds, try to continue this little project of mine by documenting the books that I have been reading and sharing my impressions about those books. I have a couple of books today. I'm not sure if it's gonna be one video. I'm gonna break them down in a couple of different videos, but I'm just gonna talk a little bit about those books and kind of share about some emotions that are connected with this. So the first book is called Still Life by Sarah Winman. So how I learned about this book, there was somebody on Facebook who was very annoyed that I guess the Russian translation of this book title was incorrect, and there was some kind of like a different translation that was supposed to be happening. And I really like the title, and I really like the cover because it's nice, and I don't know how much you can see, but basically there's like lemons and stuff, tomatoes on the corners, and like a big nice parrot in the middle. So I was kind of intrigued, and I bought it. I had some time to read it, and a couple of words about the author. So she's actually she's a writer, but she's also an actress on in different British projects. And I later found out that the audio version of the book is actually narrated by her. So I read a little bit and I listened a little bit in the car. It's an interesting book. So basically it starts at the end of the Second World War, and it follows this guy who's basically a young soldier at a time, and he meets this older lady, I guess a historian of art. She teaches art and the history of art and knows a lot about them. And of course they meet in Italy, and they help some people over there, and they make friends. And then the novel kind of like follows their entire lives until they're like whatever the end it might be. It's a wonderful story. So a couple of things that I liked about it. So first of all, it is a very English story. So there's like a lot of people. The part of the narrative takes place in England, in London. It's full of these whatever quirky English words and concepts. It is again narrated by an actress who sounds very nice, and it also has a bunch of different characters. And this is probably the second biggest selling point, meaning that those characters are diverse. There are numerous. There's like a bunch of them. There are mostly no negative or kind of like pain in the ass characters. It's all very nice and tidy, and they all go through life, and they go through different challenges, and some of them are more for the background, just to create some kind of color. They are all very likable. They are all very interesting. They are all a little bit crazy in a good way, like a lot of families are. And as I was reading it, it kind of reminded me of my family and the things that we went through. Times when there was like a bunch of people in the house, and they were all doing something and speaking in loud voices, and they were sharing their stories, and they were falling in love, and they were getting divorced, and they were kids, and those kids kind of had their own lives. It's kind of like a story about that. So it's a very character-driven narrative, very English. And the third biggest plus is that it is essentially a big love letter to Italy, and I think Florence. It is absolutely marvelous how much time does the writer devote to what seems to be a very simple life, but it is described with love and respect and absolute devotion. So she talks about what kind of food they're eating. She talks about the streets and what kind of stone is used to cobble those streets. She talks about the architecture. She talks about all the different things that are happening in that place, and like the floods or the war or the little intrigues. And then there's of course this big huge parrot that also takes kind of like some kind of a role in this space. But overall, I think it's one of those books that transports you to a particular place and lets you live a very nice leisurely life that is, as life tends to be. It has its down points, but it also has a lot of positives, and it's very bright. It left a very good aftertaste, and I was not feeling sorry that I've spent whatever amount of time that I've spent on this. I loved it. I would not think of this as a very big kind of like literature, whatever you want to put in that concept, but it's definitely a heartwarming read. I highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun. It's for people who love Italy. I personally really love Italy, and I like the food and everything, so it was like a very heartwarming thing for me, and it's just a lovely little book. The second book in my little series today is a book called Martyr by a writer whose name is Kaveh Akbar. I hope I didn't butcher that. It was the finalist of the National Book Award, and it was also featured in, I think, New York Times Best of 2024 books list. It's about a guy who's Iranian, and he basically lives in the United States for his entire life. So they immigrated very long time ago, and he has his own kind of like set of different troubles, and he's trying to figure them out while also trying to write a little book of his own about martyrdom and martyrs. It's a very interesting perspective on what it's like to be an immigrant. The second, it's a very interesting perspective on what it's like to be Iranian in the United States today. It's also an interesting perspective on life in general. So some things that I like about it. First, it is beautifully written, meaning that you can tell that he's a very good writer. He tells the story effortlessly. There's a lot of turns and quicks and whatever scenes, but it's very easy to follow. It's very enjoyable to read. Second, it's a story about young people in New York, or young people around the US in general, which is always interesting to read. So it's like young people doing dumb stuff, or young people getting in trouble, or young people cutting their feet in half by an axe, or young people who are trying to figure out their roots, understand their relationships, understand their relationships to life, to their family, to their loved ones. It's the kind of genre that I like, the trope that I really enjoy kind of like reading and finding in books. It reminded me a little bit about the probably one of my favorite books is Little Life. It's not as dramatic, and it's not as gruesome as that one, but it has some of those notes, which is like only the good ones, only the fun parts, which is great. The third thing is that it talks about this idea of martyrdom and the idea of life. The main character is a young man who has like a lot of issues, from alcohol to drugs to his mom dying in a plane crash, and his dad dying kind of like, I guess, from just not being able to cope with life. It's an interesting kind of like meditation. This meditation is presented through this Iranian lens, which is a little bit unusual, I think, in American literature, but it's also not really that common. Like you don't really read a lot of those books, and you don't really hear a lot of those voices. And this is like a very good, powerful voice. I like these musings about, what's it like to be alive. It was a fun little ride. It's also a short book, which is, in my mind, this is perfect. It's not linear, so it has a mystery in it, which is great. It has a twist, which is great. But like overall, I felt like it was like a little bit of a meditation, that you just go there and you get into the head of that character, and he kind of like puts a lot of words on paper and lets you know how he feels and what he is feeling, and in a way how oblivious he is to things that are happening around him, but also how he is just happy to be part of this life, although he's not really accepting this, and he does feel like he wants to be the smarter in a way. It takes a different turn at the very end, that it gives you yet another perspective on what life can be and how life can be approached. I actually found it very, very valuable. Of course, it has a little bit of kind of like a love element to it, and it was like very heartwarming. I'm not gonna spoil it for you, so I'm not gonna share it, but it was very heartwarming, and I was thinking, kind of like when I was reading it, I was thinking about how I met my wife, and how much it means to have this support in life, and also, in a way, how dumb younger people can be sometimes when they don't really see this or appreciate it. Okay, and last but not least, I want to talk about the book which is called In the Woods by Tana French, and kind of talk a little bit about it. The name Tana French kind of came up on my feed a lot, and a lot of book critics consider her to be kind of like the next big name in detective fiction. And I was, of course, interested to learn more. This book was like an Edgar Award winner. It was made into a TV show, and it takes place in Ireland. It then talks about the murder of a child, and it kind of like describes the daily life of a little squad of detectives who are trying to solve this murder. I have a couple of thoughts about this book, and they're not very complimentary, but these are my thoughts, so bear with me. So it is interesting, but it is not something that you have never kind of like experienced or seen in film or television or books before. So it's not really innovative. It's a procedural story, so it walks you through the process of how do detectives figure out what was happening, and it gives you some drama, and it gives you some of their internal life, personal lives. It gives you some of the very nice, interesting cultural or historical background. It is all of the things that you have probably seen on BritBox or some of these other spaces before. So it's not really, it's not gonna grip you with some, oh, I've never heard about this before. Well, you probably, if you've seen any TV show or you watched any of the kind of like this, whatever, Welsh, Irish, English detectives solving crimes, you've probably seen something like this. 2, it has a character who's a detective, but he's not really like a very experienced detective, I would put it this way. So he just got into this elite squad. He's trying to figure this out. He has some dark past, like child trauma, and he's trying to solve this case. Not 100% always super efficient, not 100% always knows what he's doing. So it's not your traditional English detective who's like, I got you. At the very end, he solves everything. This is not the kind of guy. A large part of the book is also devoted to his personal life and how he's trying to understand that and trying to figure that out. He drinks a lot. This is the first novel in that series, so I think the author was still figuring out what they want to do, and this character is kind of like this search of, he doesn't know, he's trying to find things out for himself, and he fails a lot. The third thing that I felt when I was reading this, that it was to a point very mundane. I think I've read some of these other modern British detective stories where there is this author who's basically Joanne Rowling, but she's also doing detective stories. So that author, I'll put the name somewhere in the description maybe or on the screen. But anyway, it's maybe a little bit too slow for me. There's we went to the office, the lights were on, and then we were going through to whatever records, and then we were doing this and that. So it's it's great if you want to learn about how do these things work and how do detectives actually do their detective stuff. For a book, it's not really that super engaging. And last thing, it is too real. It basically doesn't give you any fiction related way outs. There is like no God in the machine. There is like no happy endings. It's just too real. It's just about these two detectives who are struggling to find their way, who are fighting for their dear life, who don't know who the murderer is, but then they also need to prove that this suspect is a murderer, and they go through 100 different additional kind of things, and it just creates this story that is something that you would see on TV. And while it makes it very believable, unfortunately, and I liked it, but I would not say that this is something that I want to read when I'm trying to escape the world and go into fiction and detectives, and there is like very little romanticism there. It's not really the kind of story that's throwing you around and gives you like these interesting concepts and so on. That was kind of like my impression. And then the last thing I think that I've read, a lot of critics, as I mentioned at the beginning, so a lot of critics really like Tana French and they like this series, and they say that this is sort of like literature for them. I was trying to find that when I was listening and reading to this book. I was trying to find that, like, where's that seed of, you know, literature, because if you compare it to Martyr and this thing, they have vastly different. This is like, it has some thought behind it. It has a character that thinks. And this is just like a person doesn't know what he wants to do. And a person that is like, doesn't feel like he's maybe detective is not what he wants to do in a way. I hope you enjoyed this little video. I will try to do the next one as soon as I get to read a couple more books, probably in another couple of months, but maybe a little bit earlier. And thank you so much. Thank you for being subscribed to this channel. I will try to share it in all of my other social media platforms, and I will try to add a couple of links there in the description. So if you like what you see, please buy the books, share the knowledge, and then like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.